First of all, by the way, let me say this. Shout out to James Allcott. I always say this. He is my favorite football YouTuber. He's somebody that I've been watching since I was in New York, bro, making videos in my basement. Like, not doing this for a job whatsoever. He's always somebody for me that I looked up to his content in terms of I think he's very analytical. I think he's well-spoken. I think his videos are extremely digestible. And I've met him as well, too. Great guy as well, which is even more important. But he's clearly made a video on Ruben Amorim and how tactically he could have this Manchester United side looking. So, as I've continued saying, I don't know much about Ruben Amorim. I've watched 10 games maybe of his Sporting in the last few years. I'm here to learn. And I think James is somebody that I take seriously enough that whatever he's saying, I think he'll have enough validity onto it.
Ruben Amorim's Sporting side are currently top of Liga Portugal with a perfect record, having scored 30 goals and only conceded...
This is crazy, chat. Oh my God. 30 goals, 2 allowed, 9 games, 9 wins. Perfect record.
Conceding twice in 9 games. And now,
that's a crazy record.
That he is the hot favourite for the Manchester United job. We're going to tell you exactly what to expect, who will be key, and which players might have surprise new positions under Amorim.
Let's see it.
And I'm afraid there's a couple of question marks as well. This is Manchester United. So this is the lineup that cruised to a 2-0 victory over Porto this season, and in this side there are several different profiles that give us hints of not only how Manchester United will play under Amorim, but also who is going to shine from the get-go. And I say from the get-go because I think this could be a bit of a process for Manchester United.
What do we think about the fact, chat, that he plays 3 at the back? Does anybody really care about that? Because me personally, I'm not too fussed. I feel like 3 at the back it always comes with this stigma. It always comes with this narrative that it's defensive, it's not fun to watch. There's a negative kind of stigma around it. If a manager manages a 3 at the back, they're looked upon kind of like, what the hell are you doing? That's not good attacking football. However, I think it's all about how it's executed, to be honest with you. We saw a team in Antonio Conte's Chelsea that scored goals for fun. They were lethal on the counterattack, and yes, they were a very strong defensive team, but bro, they could outscore teams for the fun of it, man. I remember we went to Stamford Bridge, Man United. They put 4 past us. Obviously, LVG, at times, his 3 at the back, when it works well, it works. It really, really works. So, personally, and obviously, you saw what Thomas Tuchel had Chelsea, how quickly he was able to transform that Chelsea team due to that formation shift into a very strong defensive team, but also one that in transition were incredibly dangerous. And then when I look at, Xabi Alonso, obviously, runs a 3 at the back, and his side is really, really prioritizing positional play. But I even remember who was it as well too when it came to 3 at the back. I can't remember my trail of thought. But yeah, me personally, I think as long as it's executed well, as long as you're profiling players correctly, yes, Simone Inzaghi as well too, I don't really see too big of an issue. I think everybody wants to play 4-3-3. Everybody wants to have a nice holding midfielder that is the first phase of midfield and 2 guys. Everyone wants to play what Pep has kind of popularized over the last decade or so. But there's several ways to skin a cat, and I'm not really opposed to, as long as it's successful, I'm not opposed to the 3 at the back whatsoever.
It's gonna take time. Give me a little more time. I need to find the right profile.
Here's my thing on the time thing though, right? And sorry to keep interrupting here, right? But here's my stance on the timing thing, because me and Liban quickly discussed this yesterday. Look, I don't think management is rocket science. Yes, I understand every single manager needs at least like a season to kind of get a grip of his squad and like get his ideologies across. And especially when it's a team like Manchester United, who had been such a calamity over the last, well, I say 12 months, but really over the last 10 years. It's not like coming to Manchester City, for example. But I also believe a good coach with a good way of communicating to his players and a good footballing identity mixed with a good sporting board above him, it's not going to take 15 years to get his ideas across. In the last few seasons, we've seen Ange Postecoglou get his team already like displaying the way he wants to play within months. With him, it was actually within games. We've seen Enzo Maresca within 3 months. Chelsea already look a much more accomplished unit than they did under Pochettino. We saw Unai Emery within 2 seasons take Aston Villa from the foot of the table into the Champions League. Eddie Howe was quite similar as well too. Now that's not to say I'm expecting what's his name, Amorim, to take United to the title in his first year or even 2 years. But I'm expecting to see signs of what an Amorim team looks like within months. I am expecting that, right? I do not believe it should take a whole year, 2 years to see what kind of football a manager wants to play. I have never subscribed to that thinking. And my personal opinion about this Manchester United squad and how much of the season is left, I expect Amorim to challenge for the top 4. I do. And I don't really think I'm wrong to think so. This United team is not the finished article. I don't think it's the greatest team of all time. I don't think they're ready to challenge for the Arsenals, the Liverpools, and the Cities. But I also look at Aston Villa's squad. I look at Spurs' squad. And look, I said challenge. I didn't say he has to finish in the top four. I would expect him to mount a top four challenge. I look at their squads, and I don't think they have much more quality than Man United, if anything, to be honest with you. I think United were severely hurt by a manager that was unable to get the best out of this group tactically. Amorim is coming in to be an upgrade on Ten Hag. I don't see why it's ridiculous to expect. Look, we're 9 games into the season. There's about 30 games left of the Premier League season. That's a lot of games. That's a lot of time, and it's a lot of time for things to change throughout the league. The league, based on momentum and pendulum shifts, I don't see why it's crazy to think Man United wouldn't be able to mount a top 4 challenge by the end of the season. I don't think that's crazy to say. You win a few games, bro, and you're just like that. You're right there. I think we're 7 points behind Chelsea, and we play them at the weekend. For me, it's not the most unrealistic thing. I don't really understand this idea that every single manager needs 3 seasons to get his footballing philosophy across, and he needs to change the entire team to really see what I don't subscribe to that. I think it's something that Man United fans have held on to because we're so used to Sir Alex, who had almost 30 years in the game. I look at management in 2024. I don't think, first of all, you never see managers last that long anymore. And I think now more than ever, managers are able to kind of get their ideas across from a sporting point of view much, much quicker. And by the way, everybody said this season Ten Hag was expected to finish top 4. That would have been considered a decent season for Man United. He finished top 4 in his first season as well, by the way. It's the same group, and we all agreed Ten Hag was out of his depth. We have 30 games left of the Premier League season, about. I don't think it's as crazy a thing to say, to expect Man United to challenge for top 4. I'm not saying to win the league. I'm not even saying to finish in the top 4, but challenge for the top 4. For me, that's what I'm expecting.
The defense is a huge part of Amorim's system, and it props up the whole team due to a few different factors. Now, the first, it's mobility. The entirety of the back three are mobile. So that spells doom for a few of that Manchester United squad. But why is it so important to Amorim? Well, firstly, if you take a look at their average positions from that Porto game, you can see that the back three are quite spread out. Now, this is to aid possession, and it's to allow for a key part of Amorim's tactics that we're going to talk about in just a second. But another thing about this team that we'll go on to learn is that the approach is quite expansive. You can see this in the distances between these players. It's not compact. This is a good thing about the system, but it does mean that transitions are an area that they need to keep on top of. So having centre-backs with pace is important when defending wide spaces, but also in how...
Let's talk about that. That's the first point of debate. So James points out that Sporting play quite expansive. They play wide with their centre-backs. And I look at United centre-backs from a profiling point of view. Matthias de Ligt, for me, is not the most mobile centre-back. I don't think he is. Lenny Yoro, I think, is a bit more, mobile. And I think he's a modern-day athletic center-back. Lisandro Martinez, y'all know I love Lisandro, even though this season I think he's been shambolic at times. But one thing even Lisandro's biggest fans would have to admit, he's not mobile. He is very, very poor at defending wide areas. He's very, very poor when he kind of gets forced out to defend wingers or whatever. He's not really good at covering space in behind. I would worry about that. Because when I first heard about 3 at the back, I actually thought Lisandro and a left-sided role in a back 3, it could actually suit him. Because especially the on-ball qualities that he kind of brings, he'd be protected by that back 3, by those wing backs. But if you're asking your wide center backs to defend channels and defend wide areas and defend big areas of space, that is not Lisandro Martinez's strength whatsoever. So that's a concern right off the bat for Licha.
React when they have to defend depth. The reason for this expansiveness is to aid build-up. That's the main reason behind it. And this is where we begin to see the hallmarks of this Amorim side. So when the goalkeeper has the ball, he will often play the ball short. Now, a lot of teams will often use a mid-block against Sporting. And so to play the ball short, part of the reason for that is to bait the press somewhat and to bring some players towards them so they can play through. What's really, really interesting here and a key aspect of that back 3 is the width. These 2 centre-backs peel really, really wide to help aid that build-up. And Onana, as the goalkeeper, being able to play short, is absolutely comfortable with that. And the reason that Amorim wants his centre-backs dropping deep and peeling wide is to entice the opposition into pressing the ball. But one important part about this approach play is that it's not slow. It's not passive. They're going to play the ball nice and quickly. There's a lovely intensity.
That's another thing I didn't like about Ten Hag's football. I often felt in terms of build-up and possession, bro, the amount of times you'll see a guy just stand on the ball and slow it down, and it's pedestrian, and it's lethargic, and it's predictable. It became, honestly, so boring to watch. Just swinging back from Licha to De Ligt, back to Licha, back to De Ligt, then back to Onana, who then sits on the ball himself and looks for options, and then eventually we just hoof it long. It was such a bore draw. I like hearing that it's possession with a purpose. At times with Ten Hag, it didn't feel like that was the case.
Opposition can't get totally set. There's another reason as well. The reason
Let me move myself out of the way, by the way.
to be able to play an incisive forward pass. And so that short pass gets made in this instance. But then as we move it on, you can see in that second phase, it will be a very incisive pass. And it will be the second ball that is fired into one of the two 10s that we're going to talk about in a second. And in the process, 5 players, let me count them for you in case you can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know you can probably count. Are taken out of the game. They're sort of lured in initially and then subsequently bypassed because they suck those players in, and then they've been able to create this area here of which they love for those two 10s that we're going to talk about in just a second. So in terms of how Manchester United set up, I think it feels pretty obvious. It's got to be Evans, Casemiro and Maguire. We need that mobility. It's a joke. Relax. Look, there is somewhat of an
whose video is this? James Lawrence Allcott.
With which players are available right now. And I think that's an important...
I think the 3-back is pretty much set in stone, at least from the beginning. Or once Euro comes back. It's going to be Lisandro, Euro, and what's his name? De Ligt. I think those are the 3 he's going to go for.
Thing to say is who's available right now. Now, the reason I say this is because you're missing a player who could potentially be key in this back 3. But one player who will be really, really important, and don't worry, we're going to take these guys out now, is that, and look, Evans or Maguire could maybe play as that central player. Maybe the passing is good enough, and long-range passing as well, which is an important part of that centre-back's position as well, because sometimes when players do come on, they don't mess about, they'll play that ball in behind. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But it does feel like Martinez could be absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. Technically and athletically, he suits the system. His ability to play direct passes is going to be great in this system. Look, you've bought De Ligt. I think you need
I don't know about the athletically point of view, James. There I would tend to disagree. But I do think in terms of what he brings on the ball, that no one can ever gaslight me about, man. Lisandro, technically, in terms of playing through the lines, in terms of long passes, in terms of dribbling out of a press, Lisandro is extremely qualified. Overqualified, I would even dare say. Athletically, I'm not sure I agree, James. I have a massive worry when it comes to Lisandro defending those wide areas. I'm putting my mouse around here as if you guys can see it. But yeah, those wide channel areas, I think Lisandro is very easily exposed in those kinds of situations.
Use him, I think, and as the centre of the 3, he should also be okay in this system. Might take him a second to get totally used to it. But having played in systems that require technical ability in the past, he's a good fit for that. His metrics are a lot better than people are making out as well. He's in the top 5% for pass completion for centre-backs. And then in that right-sided position, of course, we've got a little bit of...
Don't you think that can be worked on, though? No, I don't.
The right answer, if Amorim's
I don't think that can be worked on.
The current
it's a physical trait.
Available, is Lindelof.
Wow.
Now, look, it worries me slightly. And is he the future? Probably not. But I think his speed and ability to defend depth behind him would be very useful. Or it's sort of the best, it's the next best option in terms of having an out-and-out centre-back, but someone who has played as a right-back, has played as a left-back for the team as well. So in terms of peeling wide, I think he'd be confident in doing that. But of course, Euro.
Yeah, now we're talking. Now we're talking.
Fantastic option. And Lindelof, technically, he's not at that technical level. But Lenny Euro, I think he's
Yeah, he's the
when he
future
fits,
anyways.
which obviously at some point he's going to be. I think he would be fantastic in playing in a 3. I think it would be very beneficial for his development. And a great example of this being Zeno de Bast at Sporting this season, who has been phenomenal under Amorim. Let's go back to that first phase, because there were 2 players who were completely out of shot. 2 players who in many 3 at the back teams would be considered as part of the defence, the wing-backs. Now, the reason that the wing-backs aren't anywhere to be seen is because Amorim sees them more as part of the midfield than he does the defence. Now, granted, sometimes he'll play a more defensive option.
Okay, so Amorim sees his wing-backs as more in midfield than he does in defense. That, for me, sounds like Amorim is more of a 3 at the back manager than a 5 at the back manager. And I think sometimes those two do tend to kind of be almost like put together. Like if you play 3 at the back, you play 5 at the back. The way I'm hearing it is that he doesn't play with 2 wing backs. He's almost playing with 2 wide midfielders that track back a lot. That's almost what I'm kind of hearing here. Am I wrong? That's the way I'm interpreting this, right? Who do I kind of see in those wing back positions that United have currently? I think Dalot is a no-brainer. I think Dalot is going to play in this team in terms of on the ball qualities, in terms of athleticism, being able to kind of occupy an entire flank. I would expect Dalot to be one of the wingbacks or one of the wide players. As for the other, is Mazraoui someone we're really considering like that kind of profile? I don't want to see Luke Shaw. I don't want to see Luke Shaw in my comments one single time, because that guy, as far as I'm concerned, is not a Manchester United player right now. He's unreliable. But who could it be? I'm seeing Amas. Look, if Amorim is really about his young talent, I think Amas showed a lot in preseason, but is Amas ready to play consistently in the Premier League? That's to be seen. We'll see, though.
At either left wing back or right wing back at times, but for the most part, he sees them as players who are there to attack rather than to defend. And this can be seen in the positions that they pick up when out of possession. So Sporting are playing in white, they're shooting in this direction, and this is a great example of exactly what we're talking about, because instead of dropping into a back 5, we can only see 3 here. But of course, in the next line, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the wing-backs actually sit alongside the same lateral plane as the midfield, and with one of the 2 10s also dropping into that midfield line, it creates a wall of 5 in front of a 3-man defence, which makes it very difficult for opposition players to play a forward pass into that central area. When in possession, the wing-backs are seen as out-and-out wingers. So here's Matthias Reyes right here. The left-sided centre-back, he's got the ball in possession, but what I want you to really focus on is the wing-backs and their positions. On the left, you've got Nuno
They are
Santos,
high, man. Wow, look at that.
And as wide as possible.
Look at the guy on the far side as well, too. These guys are damn near wingers, man. Oh, my God. Wow. That's crazy. I didn't know he was talking this high.
Meanwhile, Jenny Katamo is on the other side, emulating the exact same.
Bro, they're damn near wingers.
You see them pretty much in line with the forward line as well. And what this does, they play such a big part in stretching the pitch, and it therefore allows Amorim to play 2 floating 10s in those half spaces. So when I say that the wing-backs are treated as wingers, I mean it. Because the right wing-back, Katamo, actually scored in this game from picking up this position. The wing-backs are given a lot of freedom to attack, but a lot is also demanded from them going backwards, which makes it such an interesting topic when we then try and apply that to Manchester United. Because you've got to consider that both Santos and Katamo, they're pretty much wingers, playing at wing-back. So there's 2 ways of looking at it when you look at how Manchester United would set up under Amorim. So let's talk option 1. You play Dalot, and you play Mazraoui. Of course, we've not got Luke Shaw right now, but I think we've kind of not. I don't want to give up on Luke Shaw, but I think it's fair to.
I'll do it for you, James. I've given up on that guy, man. I'll do it for you. I understand you want to be more political here, but that's never really been my style. Yeah, Luke Shaw can no longer be relied upon, man. Come on. I could definitely see Dalot on the left. The way I'm seeing it on the right, though, chat, bro, I wouldn't limit it to just Mazraoui. It looks like you could put an Ahmad there. Ahmad, for me, has a decent engine, and he has a decent defensive mindset in terms of he likes to track back, he helps his fullback. I don't see Rashford, to be honest with you, being able to play that winger role. I see him more as one of the more narrow players, because Rashford, for me, if you're relying on this guy, because look, they're playing. Okay, he's saying they're playing as wingers, but you still need to provide some kind of defensive security to your team. Otherwise, Martinez, look, I'm already worried about how he could defend wide channels. If you don't have a guy who's tracking back for you, you're screwed. Look, I don't like him. I do not like Anthony. But if I'm being absolutely objective here, this role might suit him. It low-key might. I don't like Anthony. For me, I would sell him. But if he was to actually kind of have a role in this team, I don't know, man. I don't know. This might be the way to unlock him, at least to make him useful in some regard. Yeah, man. Interesting. This is interesting.
Kind of think about the team without him, because I think it's just been a consistent problem in terms of him being able to stay fit.
United needs a new left-sided player, though.
And you
honestly,
try and squeeze
like
every
top
last
level
morsel of attacking threat out of them. Now, Mazraoui, I've got faith in him. You know, I think he's got the dynamism and attacking quality to play on that right-hand side. And actually, I think Delo would be fine. Would he be a game changer? Is he an sort of out-and-out winger? No, I think he's a long way off, and I think he flatters to deceive a little bit. I think he's kind of struggling in this team and not having a sort of set position. And maybe, you know, even 5 years ago or 3 years ago, when you have like an out-and-out right-back who was, you know, dominant and crucial as being an interesting, fun, attacking right-back, you know, like Robertson back when they won the league, I think he would have thrived. But I think he's really struggled with having to play different positions, having to invert and all these different things. But Delo on the left, it gives me a feeling that Amorim, I think, might test this out before maybe moving to a different option. And I think the reason for this is that width is absolutely crucial. Do you know what? I'm actually going to do this, because those half spaces for the 10s in here and here, that comes from that width. This
is why I like James's content, man.
Delo will often, I think, want to naturally kind of come inside because he's right-footed in those kind of areas. And I don't think he will like to make the movements towards the byline, and I don't think he'll be overly comfortable doing it either. It's just not ideal. But one player that might is Garnacho. Trust me, this isn't out of the realms of possibility, and it might not happen in his first game in charge, but if you think from that viewpoint of the wing-backs being wingers, I think it will happen at
he's
some
quality.
Stage.
Honestly, he's quality. He's able to visualize his thoughts so well.
As a left wing back for this team, I see it. Next is the double pivot. And what's interesting here is that despite it being a midfield pairing, Amorim likes the profiles of the players to be hugely different. But despite the profiles being very different, they actually blend together perfectly and complement each other beautifully. This season, Amorim has favoured the pairing of Morten Hjulmand, and
this is where, for me, it's crucial, chat, because we have a lot of midfielders at the club, and I feel like they all suit different styles. They're all different profiles, but I'm not a huge fan of a lot of them. Let's see where he kind of goes with this. My biggest issue of United for the longest time, and I was very unhappy that we didn't really target it over the summer, is United doesn't really have at the club a first phase dictator that's also of a suitable athletic level. Like yesterday, Rodri won the Ballon d'Or. Whether you agree with that or not, Rodri is a guy for me that sums up the modern day midfielder. He's athletic. He wins his duels. He wins his aerial duels. He's very vertical when he needs to be with his passing. He can break lines. He pops up with goals. He's athletic. Defensively, he can defend. On the ball as well, too. He's the point of all attack. And now, I know Rodri is like, that's the blueprint. Every team on the planet would like a Rodri. But you look throughout the Premier League, you look at what Liverpool have kind of done with Ryan Gravenberch. That guy's not getting beat by anyone physically. But also, he's got the technical skill set to start attacks, to be the reference point, going from first phase to second phase to third phase. You look at like Real Madrid, Camavinga. You look at Barcelona, what they're doing now with this Casado kid. United has really missed a profile like that. And it's why, for me, the Ugarte signing, while Ugarte has his own skill set, playing out from the back is not really one of them. He's not really a technically like brilliant footballer. And I think it's something that United really haven't had for a long time. So let's see where James kind of goes with this.
Daniel Bragança. Now, last season, it was Hjulmand and Morita. But Morita and Bragança, they're really similar in terms of their profiles. And actually, they're very similar to one Manchester United player in particular. And this is a good example of how both of these players differ. So here we have Bragança right here. Let me just zoom in on him. And then all the way back here, we've got Hjulmand. Hjulmand's instructions are to stay central for the most part and to play simple, short passes from that area, operating in front of the centre-backs. and he's going to play those passes, but
I've heard a lot
it's
about this
a
guy.
maximum of 2 touches to keep the pace of the ball and the pace of the tempo as high as possible. Meanwhile, Braganza is given more of a license to move into sort of wide areas for dialogue with the left wing back or the left-sided 10. Think Bernardo Silva somewhat, right? But what's also important to remember is that Hjulmand and Braganza don't sway too far away from each other in build-up. When the ball's in those initial stages of build-up, you'll see the two here. Nice and narrow and together and connected. And you can see that both Hjulmand and Braganza have a great understanding of each other's movement and that understanding of where to be in different phases of play.
But that also tells me then that they're going to be highly involved in build-up. If you're that close to your back line, you're the connection between that back three to the 2 number 10s, the 2 wing backs. I look at Casemiro. I look at Ugarte. Like, for me, those guys are not the reference point that you kind of want to be playing if you're a center back. Like, you look up, those are not the 2 guys you feel comfortable giving the ball to. And Eriksen, I do think so. But then Eriksen kind of comes with his own caveat in terms of the fact that physically he's washed. He's a bit of a hologram at times. Kobbie Mainoo, I haven't even thought about him because he's been out for a few weeks now. How does it kind of fit with everything? Casemiro will not play at all. Yeah, because I think Ugarte is going to play, right? Ugarte is his guy. And he tended to like an Ugarte. He tended to like a Painha before Ugarte. So Ugarte is probably going to play. There's no way you can play Ugarte and Casemiro, surely. Especially if you're looking for one of those guys to be more of the Hjulmand rather than the destroyer.
Play, and that's absolutely crucial when it comes to that midfield for an Amorim side. Right, back to the tactics build. So when it comes to Manchester United, I think that this could be an area of the squad that they have players that are most suited to Amorim's style. Positives. Now, firstly, Kobbie Mainoo, I think, is a really, really good.
He's gonna play. He's gonna play no matter what.
Team. He's well suited to being the slightly more attacking midfielder of the two. I think he would be the Braganza in this scenario. Not only does he have great qualities in linking play in the final third, but he's also great at receiving the ball as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Despite that moment against Liverpool. But generally, actually, it's something I would like Mainoo to kind of take more responsibility to go and pick up the ball. I mean, we saw that in the Euros, and we've seen that a million times. And that is a key skill for Amorim's approach. Now, the second player, sorry, I just burped there. Second player is a player that actually has worked under Amorim before. And we need to remember that Manuel Ugarte, was actually sold by Sporting to PSG for £50 million off the back of his performances under Amorim. That's not exciting. I don't know what is. Now, Hjulmand was, in fact, the Ugarte replacement. So
wow. Really? You know what, chat? Amorim, for me, he has to be the guy, bro. Because if you can make Manuel Ugarte a £60 million player, bro, you're one hell of a manager. If you can make Manuel Ugarte look like £60 million worth of footballer, you are some manager, bro. Because, hey, unless I'm not seeing something with this guy, 60 mil is wild for me. So, Amorim, you might be the guy, bro. You might be the guy.
Ugarte, you will have a good understanding. And look, if you're going to have someone with a good understanding within
Sekou Kone, I don't know enough about him. I know he signed him. I don't know enough about him.
And be at the center of it all is a good option. That's a huge advantage for him to have. And look, despite being at the base of midfield and distributing long balls being something that you would expect from that kind of player,
£100 million player. That's a good point.
I think that's something that we'll see from him. I don't think it'll be something that we asked of him, as we've spoken about. I think it'll be a lot of direct passing coming from those defenders like Martinez, because he has that kind of in his locker, and it allows you to be direct and bypass the press at times. But with Ugarte, I think you've got someone who can understand how Amorim wants to play, and he will play those short passes. And then, as a two,
you got me, Darrage.
Tenacious and go and win the ball for the team. The one question I do have over Kobbie Mainoo is that, with the pitch being nice and wide and big, does Mainoo have the ability to drive past in the middle third? I think in the final third, when there's a lot of players around him, he's so brilliant in possession, he can get out. Can he, from this position here, can he drive past players? Has he got the pace to do that? Let me know. Man United fans are going to know better than me.
The explosiveness in his game more so. Like, I don't really like when people say Mainoo's not athletic. I think that's a stretch. Like, Mainoo is an athlete. He's a professional footballer. But is he, like, a driver of the ball like that? Like, he picks up the ball from his own first phase and then just, like, runs with it and carry, like, a la Declan Rice, per se. Not so much for me. For me, Mainoo is a guy that in tight spaces is exceptional. Turning on the half turn, getting himself out of tight situations. In the final third, I think he's quite creative. But in terms of picking up the ball and like James correctly points out, carrying it from point A to point B like that, past players. I don't know if he's got that in his game at this point in his career.
Below, has he got the pace to go and drive? Now, the attacking three in this team have three different roles, and to properly understand them, we're going to break them down one by one, starting off with Pedro Gonçalves. Now, despite often playing from the left, Gonçalves he's not a pacey direct winger. He's more of a playmaker. And he's actually at times played in midfield as well. And his role in the side has seen him rack up 36 goal involvements since the beginning of last season.
God damn.
And it's a really interesting role in terms of who would fill that same role for Manchester United. Now, this is the type of position that Pedro Gonçalves absolutely bloody loves. There he is in those half spaces that we've been talking about that are so crucial. Now, the reason why he's able to get in those positions, as we spoke about before, is because of the width that's offered by Nuno Santos. So by him, and I think it's always great to sort of draw the lines, by him offering that width, it then offers this half space here for Gonçalves to operate in on that left-hand side. And it also allows him space to then drive into. And it makes it difficult for the opposition as well, because they know, this defender here
is their opposition hashtag United's hilarious.
The pass might come. And so that's often going to freeze this defender because he wants to be ready to go here. He wants to stay compact with his back line here. But he also needs to be ready to go out to that wing back. And so Gonçalves has got a lot of options there, and it's making life very difficult for the opposition. So his positioning there, but also what he can do once he gets the ball, is absolutely crucial in being effective. But the main role for Gonçalves is to facilitate the striker, Gyökeres. And of course, that's Gyökeres right there. We're going to come back and talk about him in more detail. So what often happens is that he'll get the ball in this position here, kind of just on the outskirts of the midfield, in that half space, and then he will look to drive the ball. And by driving with the ball, he will do it with lots of little touches, because he's great at doing that. And the idea is to take players away from Gyökeres and simultaneously open up the passing lane to him. So as you can see him here, they're all pretty structured at that moment. But as we move along, when he makes those sort of jinking runs towards the penalty area, now you have a new focus from those defenders who've got to make their way to him.
I was going to say, so in my chat right now, Tiago08 Martins, he says Pedro Gonçalves is very similar to Bruno. I have to be honest, I was thinking the exact same thing. It literally, everything that James is describing in terms of Pedro Gonçalves' role is literally, for me, screaming Bruno Fernandes. And here's the thing with Bruno, right? He splits a lot of opinion amongst football fans, amongst Man United fans. However, we need to, and I think, well, if you want my opinion on him, I think he comes with a lot of flaws. I think he comes with a lot of strengths, but I'm very unconvinced about what a team's ceiling can be if Bruno Fernandes is your best player or one of your best players. However, you need to think about this from a professional point of view. If you are a new manager coming into a club that already is in a bit of a chaotic situation, you're looking at guys you can kind of lean on, senior players. Bruno is the captain. Bruno has been known to be a tremendous trainer. Bruno is a very respected guy in the dressing room. If Amorim, and he's a Portuguese man as well too, who has worked at Sporting, if Amorim comes in, Bruno Fernandes is going to be one of the first people that he kind of leans on. That's not to say that Bruno Fernandes long-term is going to be the key to everything that Amorim does, but this season, without a doubt, in my opinion, he comes in and Bruno is he's starting, bro. He's one of the big players in this team.
Which then creates a little passing lane, be it to Gyökeres, or if he needs to, there can be that driving run from the wing back as well. But it's sucking players out, and he's absolutely fantastic at doing it. Hence the 36 goal involvements. People say stats are for mugs. You know who you are. And because this role isn't one centered around pace and has more of a creative focus, it could mean that Bruno Fernandes is the perfect player.
But this is where now it gets techie, right? It gets techie because look at how many players haven't been involved yet, chat. Rashford hasn't been named here. Garnacho hasn't been named yet. Ahmad hasn't been named yet. Joshua Zirkzee hasn't been named yet. Mason Mount hasn't been named yet. Rasmus Højlund hasn't been named yet. There's a lot of guys now that still have to be introduced per se. And these are some big players that it's not very easy to drop as a manager. But he's going to have to make big decisions because, to be fair, he put Garnacho on the left, but I'm guessing he meant to say Dallo was going to be the first guy here. So it's he put Garnacho there, Chet, but he was talking about potential left backs. But the first guy that he said was Dallo in terms of that rule. So let's say it's Dallo there and not Garnacho. So we'll say Garnacho hasn't been named yet there.
On this kind of left hand.
Because Bruno's going to play. I agree.
His creativity and ability to work well in tight spaces. I think it makes him a really good fit for the role. Bit of an outside shout, but I guess he's the backup as well.
W squad.
This has kind of been the problem throughout, but maybe there's different areas for this man as well. Is this man here, Mason Mount? Let's think about Mason Mount for a second, because the Chelsea Mason Mount is a player who's incredibly intelligent, is good in these half spaces, but has energy to dribble with the ball, but also the intelligence to see other players around him, and he's a selfless player as well. So I think we could really see a rejuvenated Mason Mount if Bruno Fernandes at any point wasn't available. And that's...
I think the issue here, you're relying on Mason Mount to be available, which is easier said than done, and then Bruno Fernandes not available. Does he know? That guy's the most available footballer of all time, man. I've never seen a player more available than Bruno Fernandes. I have to be honest with you, chat. I liked Mason Mount at Chelsea. I tried rationalizing the move to United. I don't agree with people who are saying that he's never been good. I think he was quite clearly a good player at Chelsea. That's a stretch for me. However, do I think he has a future at Man United past this season? I don't really think so, chat. I think as long as Bruno Fernandes is at Man United, Mason Mount will, for long-term, really struggle to find himself a consistent starting spot in this team.
That is a huge thing for me, I think, when it comes to Manchester United, is Amorim has to come in and he has to go, I'm not bothered about the names. I'm bothered about the profiles. And I'm bothered about, it's a clean slate. Show me what you can do. And I think that will give these players a real kind of kick up the arse and a freshness that I think they've been struggling with, because the size of the club and the names within it, I think, has been crippling this team a little bit. Right, let's talk Gyökeres, the striker. We did a whole video on him last season. He's been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he's been insane signing.
Amorim has turned him into one of the hottest strikers in Europe right now. And since the start of last season, Gyökeres has scored a total of 48 goals. But what people don't talk about actually enough is he's registered 14 assists from a total of 54 matches as well. And if Amorim can do this with a certain Manchester United player, then I think it becomes very, very
Gyökeres.
Gyökeres' movement is key for his goals. He often plays as high as possible to be able to make these runs in behind. He doesn't really need to get involved in the link-up play due to having those two. Who
was Sporting striker before Gyökeres?
And so that allows him to focus on his movement. And kind of
was it Bas Dost, or am I thinking too far back? I know Bas Dost was with Bruno. Who was it before Gyökeres? Was it Bas Dost? Paulinho. I'm not familiar with him. What kind of center forward is he? You guys are still going to flop. Problem isn't the manager, it's the players. That would make a lot of sense if the manager hadn't signed or debuted 75% of the squad. It would, but fair enough. He sucks. Big, not a fast one. Because I'm just thinking between Xerxes and Højlund. If I had to compare who is the striker most similar to Gyökeres that we have, I think Højlund is more of a like for like than Xerxes. Do you think Ineos need their second Tanag and getting Amorim this summer? A lot of the players they bought fit Amorim much better than Tanag's system. Do you think so? For me, Mazraoui and Xerxes and De Ligt, those are Tanag signings, bro. They can't convince me otherwise. I see Xerxes maybe more occupying those number 10 positions than as the lead number 9. For me, if you compare Gyökeres to a center forward, Højlund is of that profile, or of a more similar profile to him than a Joshua Xerxes.
Pushing that back line back, or making them...
Victor's a far better dribbler than Erasmus. I actually think Højlund's a decent dribbler as well.
And facilitating and creating space at times for those 2-10s.
I didn't say Højlund could
also
lace
another
his
part
boots.
of his game so many people forget about, and that's the runs that he makes into wide areas. And whilst his runs through central areas are super effective from a goal-scoring perspective, it's those continuous runs, and those continuous runs into the channels at times. It's these types of runs where you see a huge part in him getting those double figures for assists last season. His constant runs into wide or central areas, they often drag defenders out of position, create space for others. He is a really selfless striker, which is, a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it, when you're thinking of someone going out and scoring goals, but he actually helps the team fly so much. And his profile, his endeavour, it does fit very, very nicely with a certain Manchester United striker. So with that pace and endeavour, humility in mind as well. It's absolutely key. I think Man United, they've got two options for the striking spot at present, and those two are, of course, Xerxes and Højlund. And for this specific role, there
I
is
agree,
but one
Arj. I
man.
think
And
Rashford
this
is more
it
suited
now,
to this
guys.
than Xerxes.
This is the
But
moment,
yeah.
right? It's very hard to look past Højlund. If I was Højlund, I would go, now. If I want to be world class, I'm at Manchester United, and I've got a manager who is going to really facilitate my strengths, which is my hard work, my pace, my willingness to run those channels, but my, endeavor to get into the box time and time again. And it's one where, like, if I work hard for you, you'll work hard for me. And I think Højlund.
Yeah, I would expect Højlund to be one of the first players that Amorim kind of pulls into his office on his first day and has a real one-on-one conversation depicting exactly what he envisions for him. Because when you look at Rasmus Højlund, right, I haven't been very convinced by him since he joined the club. However, I do feel for him in some regards, because there are things I really like about Rasmus Højlund. Like James just pointed out, I think he's incredibly athletic. Højlund is an athlete, man. Honestly, this guy, when he runs on the ball, he's fast. And he's a big guy as well, too. However, I do think that under Ten Hag, he's almost been asked to transform into the center forward that plays with his back to goal and holds the ball up. And I even think the way that he even tries doing that, it's completely off in terms of the fun that, like, you look at the best hold-up strikers in the game. Rasmus Højlund's, even his technique in terms of how he tries holding up the ball, it's all wrong when you compare it to the likes of the Watkins and now the Kai Havertz. Like, that's not his game. However, Højlund has also shown when you send the ball in behind to him, the guy can run for days, and he's very dangerous in transition. So when you have a player with certain qualities, the job of a manager, and I say this about every player, is to maximize the strengths and minimize the weaknesses. The Manchester United manager, the next one, should be looking at him and saying, how can I get Rasmus Højlund running at goal with the ball in behind as many times a game? Because look, I think he has good qualities that if used correctly, he can be a very, very dangerous player in the Premier League. So Højlund would be, for me, one of the first players that I kind of wrap my arm around and say, look, you're going to have a huge part to play. If based on what he did with Gyökeres, Højlund is the closest thing United have to that kind of profile. Guys are saying Kai Havertz now can't play with his back to goal. Come on, Chad. That's one of his biggest strengths at Arsenal. He's literally used as a guy to play off of.
It's now, man. Like, it really is. Xerxes is a player who likes to drop into spaces and receive the ball, and that may be useful for Amorim, but not as a 9. I just don't see that happening. Højlund's pace, that willingness to make those runs, are going to be key for this team. And at times, Amorim, I think, will instruct Onana, actually, to make those big, longer passes to allow Højlund to run in behind, and that's a viable option when you've got Højlund up top, as opposed to someone like Xerxes. Right, we've got that last spot within this team, the right attacking midfield spot. Sporting currently have Trincao playing there, and he's been awesome for them
for me, chat.
Long. He loves to.
This is Ahmad, right attacking midfield. This right half space right here, the one that's left, it's Amad Diallo for me, man. It's Amad Diallo. And I know he's not going to say Amad. I'm expecting him to say Rashford. I don't know who he's going to say. But for me, Amad still has a part to play for this team. And if we're talking about two dual 10s that play either side of a center forward, I'm going Amad.
Find these sort of pockets of space. In those half spaces, as we've spoken about on both sides, you've got those two 10s. You've got that bit of freedom to get into those different areas. And as we've spoken about, Højlund kind of making those runs, or Gyökeres, of course, for Sporting. And the other great thing about it, because of the formation, is that these players, they don't need to provide any width, because you're getting that width from those two wing-backs. And here's a perfect example of it. Trincao right here in those half spaces, not holding that width, because you've got that width coming from Giovanni Quenda, who's holding that right wing-back position. And this moment is such a great example of Trincao, and also a great example of the synergy that's built by Amorim when he manages the side. Because when Trincao carries the ball towards the Estoril defence, you can see Gyökeres making this run. This diagonal run across the defence, which again drags players away, like we mentioned earlier. And what does that do? It allows Trincao to carry on his run towards the goal, creates a space for him, and allows him to get a shot away, and not just get a shot away,
This guy's channel name is James Lawrence Allcott, JLA.
Score a goal as well. And this type of synergy is something that the Manchester United players are going to have to learn. And I think it's something that Manchester United fans are going to love to see. But the big question from Manchester United's perspective is who does this? Okay, let's get comfortable here because this is the one. This is the shout that could get clipped up. I might get in trouble here, but Trincao is a kind of like a Phil Foden profile. So in terms of a like-for-like player, you just don't really have that kind of guy. In terms of sort of the tight feet, you've got someone like Diallo, who could come in and do that, right? But he's kind of more of a winger.
I don't agree. I think Ahmad is very good in those half spaces. But go on.
Someone like Xerxes, who we've spoken about, I don't really feel like he's that 9 because he's not going to run those channels like Højlund is. But he can drop deep and pick up the ball in those areas. But can he drive with the ball with the same kind of intensity?
Not really.
Maybe. And will he be able to work back and work hard for the team as well, for someone who's kind of been playing as a centre forward for the last, couple of years, let's say? Here's another option. Now, one thing that Sporting have done, and we spoke about it a year ago, or not even a year ago, was it, when Amorim was linked with Liverpool, was the role of Marcus Edwards. Now, Marcus Edwards is left-footed, but will play in these areas and has the ability and running intensity to then work into these channels.
Let me say this about Rashford, chat, right? Rashford is another one that's very, very polarizing amongst the Man United fan base, in terms of a lot of people are sick of him. A lot of people think that after all the time that he spent at United, it's time to kind of go in a different direction. People think he's stagnated. This is, again, what I would say about Marcus Rashford, because I do agree with a lot of the things that have been said, even though I still think in terms of like actual talent, he's one of the better players at the club. If I'm a manager coming into Manchester United, there's a few players that I'm looking at and telling myself, I think if you give me the chance to work with them, I can get the best out of them. I think Marcus Rashford is probably one of those players, chat. I'm being pretty objective here. You guys know how I stand on the guy. Me personally, I think it's better for both parties to leave. But if a manager comes into Manchester United, I think Rashford is one of, if not the first player that managers look at and say, give me some time with him. He has the physical skill set, the technical skill set to actually become a top player under my stewardship. I think most managers, if they came to Man United, he's one of the players that they look at and say, I'm going to challenge myself to get the best out of him. Because if I do, we have a hell of a player here. And that's never been a question. Nobody can say Rashford is not a talented player. That no, even his biggest critics can't say that. So I do think that no matter what manager United get, he's one of the guys that they're going to look to build around, or at least look to get back to his very, very best. So I don't know where he's going to fit into this per se, because he's not a right-sided player for me. I think he's shown numerous times. For me, he'd either be the number 9 in terms of, I don't think Rashford's a great lone number 9. But I would imagine he's playing on one of these left-hand sided positions. I think Rashford will play, at least in the first season.
And with Rashford, you're not going to be able to get that. But what you might get, and what might work quite well with someone like Mazraoui or Delot on this right-hand side, as someone who's not an out-and-out kind of a winger, even though they're playing as a wing-back, is someone who will kind of run the channels in this half. Now, are you wasting the use of Højlund a bit here, a little bit? I think this is what he might end up doing, is giving Rashford a chance in this position and seeing if he enjoys it. Because what he can do is he is technically fantastic and he can run with the ball brilliantly. And maybe not in this channel over the course of his career. He's actually been much better, obviously, on this side of the pitch. He's able to cut in on that right foot. And so not being that left footer, it's not ideal, but I think it's Rashford that they'll give the opportunity to. But there is one man. There is one man who has struggled, but in terms of profile and fit, is probably the best.
I love this video so much, man. James, this was an amazing video. Genuinely, I enjoyed 99% of it. Incredible. It's very, very insightful. Clearly, a lot of research went into this. Like I always say, I think the way you're able to kind of like visualize what you're saying with the tactics board, incredible. But wow, you broke my heart, man. You broke my heart with this one. Please, God, no, man. No, for me, if I'm being completely objective, I could see Antony in one of like the winger areas. For me, if you like, this is where I don't agree with James. He's saying Ahmad for him is more of a natural wide player, and now he's putting Antony there. I view it the complete other way. Antony for me is a touchline winger. That's his game. Ahmad for me in the half spaces, I think that's his bag, bro.
Best fit. I think, look, Mason Mount, you can have another discussion here. Can he play on that position? He has played on the right-hand side for Chelsea as well. So could be an option that you want to go down. Let's talk Anthony. Yes,
we
he
have
cost
to?
a lot of money. But could he
Do we have to talk about him?
really offer something? You know, we talk about those movements from Marcus Edwards and then cutting in. That is something that he can do. You know, maybe it's not time to give up on Anthony just yet. Maybe he could thrive in this Amorim system. So how
You
long
don't
is it gonna
believe it. You don't believe it. You don't believe that. James is just trying to be a good tactician, good analyst, and look at every single situation under the light. He's just trying to be fair here. You don't believe that. There's no chance he believes that.
Amorim, which players are going to thrive? Which areas are you concerned with? And if you want to know how Højlund could turn into Gyökeres, because Amorim did it, you can find out by watching this video right here.
The GOAT, man. Appreciate you, James. All jokes aside, incredible video. And like I always say, go show James some love, man. As you can see, I'm already subscribed, man. That's my guy. Or as you can see now, that's my guy. Yeah, very, very insightful video, man. Honestly, I enjoyed that.